One.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective. Today is January 6th, and this is episode 666. And as you guessed, we'll be talking about the infamous events of January 6th, 2021, and some of the stuff that's happened since then, and a whole lot more. So go ahead, leave a like, and start super chatting your thoughts and questions, and we could use your support. Please welcome here to represent the pro-insurrection side of the argument. I'm just kidding, I hope. It's Nikos Sotirakopoulos.
Hi. So as I was telling you before we started, January 6th was one of the biggest mistakes and political miscalculations I've ever done. So I'm here today to take the L.
Okay, so that's always nice for me to hear, because I know we disagreed here and there, and generally I think I turned out to be correct. Now, was it your mistake that you underestimated how important it was, or how significant it was?
Yes. So my thinking back then was this: if you have 100 people who escape the lunatic asylum and they attack the Capitol, is this an insurrection? The point is, no, it's not an insurrection. You just say, oh, we had an incident, some people escaped the asylum. So two things have changed since then that made me reevaluate this belief. The first was that it turns out that this was more organized than we thought. And this came in the following months and years when we had better footage. So, for example, back then, you could be mistaken for thinking that what happened is that some protesters saw an empty space in front of them and said, okay, let's go in. Turns out, no, when you have a break point from 8 different spots, when you attack and you enter the Capitol from 8 different spots, it means that it's not that some people said, oh, here's a good opportunity to go in and take selfies. That's the one thing. The other thing is that I hadn't realized what is the percentage of conservatives and Republicans who actually thought that storming the Capitol is a good idea. The latest research, according to The Hill, which took place relatively recently this year, says that, and let me give you the exact number, among Republicans, 33% backed, i.e. supported the actions in the Capitol, and 9% say they were not sure. So this gives us something above 40% of people who are saying that either this was a good idea or I'm not sure. And another thing that made me find it way creepier than I found it back then was how some people were actually wanting the head, metaphorically or literally, I don't know, of people like Nancy Pelosi and Mike Pence. So when you have people who enter a building and they're saying, let's find that person or bring her to us, things can go really, really wrong. So the idea I had back then that these were some weirdos who went there to take selfies and these are clearly mentally deranged people, I don't share it anymore. And one last thing before we get back to you. Recently, I was revisiting the story of the lynching in Ramallah in 2000 of 2 Israeli soldiers. If you want to see the story, go to Wikipedia, 2000 Ramallah lynching. And it shows how quickly a mob can turn, things with a mob can turn really, really, really bad. So there were 2 Israelis who found by mistake themselves in the West Bank. And this was a time where Palestinians were very, very angry for the death of some young people. And these people were in a building, in a police station, and the police was trying to, the Palestinian police was trying to protect them from the mob, and then the mob went in and lynched them. So what I'm saying with this is that it's very, very easy for things to get really, really, really bad with a mob. And these were things that I had underestimated 2 years ago. And actually, I was furious with many objectivists. I had a huge fight, I remember, with Razi saying, you people you are all deranged, you have Trump derangement symptom. How can you say this is an insurrection? 2 years later, I find myself being on the wrong side back then.
Well, it takes a man to admit. And anytime we've disagreed with regards specifically to Trump and the Republicans, I've always said, hey, look, man, I'm sitting back and just watching you learn at your own pace. Like I know, I'm confident that anyone who really wants the truth is going to end up hating Trump as much as I've come to. And my Trump derangement syndrome really matured around the election, around the 2020 election. So as Trump was announcing his own victories, when it finally occurred to me that the rejection of any methodology, any rational process, that's the scariest thing to have in politics. So I never had a strong opinion on should this be called an insurrection or not. That was never really my particular point. To me, it just January 6th marked the utter failure or the utter kind of climax of the whole new right, this shitpost, sneering, Pepe the Frog, trolling / rejecting principle, rejecting the Constitution, just this, everything that had taken place on the right in recent years, I saw as like coming to full fruition on January 6th, the recklessness, the chaos, the utter disrespect for foundational institutions representing rule of law and due process and the proper, process and peaceful transfer of power, the types of people who they keep on hammering away at things that are sacred while saying like, oh no, I was trolling. We were trolling you. You can't say anything. We were only trolling. And it's like, okay, now they're actually entering the US Capitol while the presidency is being transferred from one administration to the next. They're disrupting that in a forceful way, but it's just trolling. And it's just whether or not we call it an insurrection, whether or not those people deserve to be in prison or not, to me is not the main issue. To me, it just shows the failure of everything that the Republican Party had come to be. And as I know you want to discuss, as I do, we've seen more of that since then. So basically on January 6th, I thought to myself, there's no way Republicans are going to stand by Trump after this, or like, there's no way Republicans even Republicans can never downplay this. Like anyone who wants any sort of credibility is going to need to distance themselves from January 6th under no unequivocal terms. And, we saw within a few months, certainly within a year, certainly within the last 2 years, January 6th has come to be like very, very not a big deal to the right, the new right. Many Republicans, they downplay how significant it was. They give you the usual talking points. Oh, well, if the left did this, you wouldn't care. So it's fine. Anyway, it's come to they've come to just mock anyone who makes a fuss about January 6th. And that's not the only way that this chaos has been normalized. Others like this. So, yeah.
So there's a saying in sports, which is that victory or defeat becomes a habit. And there's another saying which says the way you do one thing, you do everything. So the biggest legacy of January 6th, I still don't consider it such a monumental event in itself because of the type of people who participated. But who would have guessed that more mainstream conservatives would take the spirit of January 6th, which says we're in an absolute collision course with reality. We're an absolute, actually, divorce with reality. They would take this mode of thinking and apply it in other areas. 2 examples. So, first of all, why are we claiming that January 6th was a complete divorce with reality? Because even people very close to Trump were telling him, look, you have nothing to support that the election was rigged. Forget it. The election was not stolen. Proceed. And even today, there are Trumpites who say the election was stolen. And you ask them, please, can you give me the evidence? You've had 2 years now. You must have found something. There is zero evidence. Now, the same mode of thinking, I've seen it recently among many conservatives on the issue of the vaccines. So this week we had thankfully not tragic, or looks like the guy is doing quite well, this American football player who collapsed on the pitch after a collision. And then you had people like Kirk, like Candace Owens, these countercultural conservatives saying that we all know what this was about. Some people kind of winked, didn't say it open. Candace Owens openly said the vaccines now pose a threat to young athletes. And you ask them, where is your evidence for that? First of all, merely asking for evidence has now become a meme that you're this soy jack who is this kind of despicable being and you shouldn't even ask for evidence. But you ask them and they either send you some print screens from some other tweets or some zero heads articles. And then when you see the actual research, it's so laughable. So many people on Twitter challenged me on that and I said, okay, give me your evidence. And they send me some lists with supposedly athletes who have collapsed. And there was one athlete had crushed his head in an accident and that's how he died. But suddenly, supposedly he was one of these people who died suddenly from the vaccine. Another poor guy died from cancer and he's included in the victims of the vaccine. Or there are people who never collapsed or who never died. So these people want to believe something and they will make up anything so that they believe this. And there's a name for this. We call it primacy of consciousness. I want something to be true, therefore I make it true. So we see the same mindset which we saw in these mentally deranged people who attacked the Capitol. We saw the same mode of thinking to major conservative pundits, to major conservative personalities. So this is why we could, another way to put it is, there have been many January 6th for conservatives, epistemological January 6th. The war in Ukraine is another example, but that's a big discussion of its own. So that's the legacy of January 6th. The hell with reality, whatever we want to believe is truth, which is exactly what the postmodernists of the left are doing. So well done, conservatives. You are the new postmodernists. You are the new people who say, my feelings above reality.
Yeah, around the time of, the 2020 election and January 6th, I was saying like the Republican Party is basically, it's like the party of Alex Jones. It's the party of like kooky people on the internet, that like with no credibility whatsoever, who everyone kind of knows is full of it, but it's better than the establishment. Supposedly, they just grab little bits and pieces of evidence and they turn that into the whole story. They turn that into the a full report. Definitely in the era of COVID, obviously should be obvious, lockdowns and all types of draconian measures taken by governments were a huge violation of people's individual rights. I was the one always saying this is the reality of the lobby system reaching all of us, or not I shouldn't say the lobby system, the reality of the regulatory state reaching all of us. For decades and a century plus, we've been saying, regulate those businessmen, cut off their balls, excuse me, because, who are they to be so selfish? And now here we are all being locked in our own homes for a year because, who are we to have such selfish desires to live our lives? People definitely had reason to be suspicious of the establishment. But that being said, when there's no rational methodology, you're going to end up all over the place. So the way people have spoken about this vaccine, so now anytime someone drops dead, that can only be the vaccine that's caused it to happen. It can't be another medical issue, and it can't be COVID, right? I mean, COVID can never kill anyone. It could only be the vaccine that killed them.
And even when people are not dead, that's the crazy thing. Or there was a Greek athlete who he was battling cancer since 2017 or something, and he died some months ago. Guess what was the anti-vaxxers' explanation? So this means that as a person, you're so dark that you see someone dying and you're like, here's an opportunity to jump. It's exactly what these disgusting people who in the beginning of COVID were spreading all these scare stories. The ventilators are full of 35 years old giving a battle for their lives, so you'd better stick at your home. What type of person must you be to be so gleeful when there's this horrible news that you want to jump on them, to spread not even an actual helpful narrative, to spread a BS narrative to support your cause? But this is exactly what people like Candace Owen are doing these days.
Yeah, I guess she would say that that's how dangerous this vaccine is. So she needs to take the opportunity to bring that to people's attention. But she's completely unhinged. And by affiliation. She's made the conservative movement, the conservative media, especially the internet. But really, yeah, Fox News, Tucker Carlson, all of them look like kooks. And the more this has been taking place, and I know my Trump derangement syndrome is a little bit farther along than yours. So I've been really looking back farther and realizing, in my opinion, like Fox News was always kind of like a parody of a news channel. It's like they dress the part, they have the logo, they have the music, but it's like they're always kind of making fun of like a news channel in a weird way. Because, before cable news, the news was, educated people who had some kind of verification. Yes, they have leftist persuasions as they were educated in mainstream universities or Ivy League, whatever. But, Fox News is just kind of like this gun-toting, cowboy hat-wearing group of, country music fans who are perpetuating this view. And Rush Limbaugh is like the AM radio, partner in this crime of like constantly telling people, especially less educated people, the left is after you. The establishment hates you. You better be armed. You better be armed. The left is coming for your kids and you better be armed. And this is not serious. This is unserious stuff, and it's very potentially dangerous. So, when January 6th happened, I brought up Rush Limbaugh. I brought up, like others like him. So this really goes farther back than Trump. In a big way, I think Trump was taking advantage of what was, of an opportunity he saw. He's a real marketing guy. He knows how to tap in to people's mood and their fears. The vaccine was a huge way that people stoked fear and kept on driving the new right, driving the alt-right, driving these these current day right wingers away from normal society. Now, there's not to say normal society is like, in the best shape it's ever been. But again, it's like when you take a bad situation and you hot-headedly, excitedly, and passionately start to just try to burn down the whole thing. And half the time you're using humor, half the time you're just using hyperbole, and all of the time you're resisting any sort of call for prudence and patience. You're not making things better. You're making things worse. So the vaccine is this, the way that the right have handled Ukraine, I think, is also very embarrassing. Like the way they've described it. Yeah. No one ever claimed that Zelensky is like the world's greatest politician or something. But at a time in history when America sends aid to virtually everyone on planet Earth, to make such a big deal out of like, oh, why is Ukraine, draining all this money out of us? Oh, this is one big hoax. Candace Owens, or Candice, as she's apparently called in Greece. She's out there saying like it's all one big racket, like Zelensky is like orchestrating. Ukraine was clearly attacked. How is that a racket? Like he's asking for money. You can say we shouldn't give him any, but to say like it's one big hoax is ridiculous, right?
Yeah, more and more I see this meme among libertarians, particularly, who says that the war in Ukraine is a hoax, or that's how they present it, that Zelensky is an actor. And my question is, what exactly are you claiming? That there is no war? Yes, of course, Zelensky is doing photo ops that have to present him as heroic. This has been happening since read the history of the Spanish Civil War that happened almost a century ago, and you will see how old these techniques are. But this doesn't. What is your point? Your point is what? That Russia didn't attack Ukraine. So again, complete divorce from reality. And if you think that you're going to own the left by approaching the way that the left views the world, good luck to you.
Yeah, so there's the postmodernism is, it's very present on the right because they're so anti-intellectual, they don't realize it, so many of them. But like denying an historical event, not only historical, an event taking place currently, saying like, oh, no, like it's wag the dog, right? I mean, this is straight out of postmodernist playbook. Should we read some super chats?
Of course.
All right, Marilyn, thank you for $4. Jeff Bannister, thank you for $3 Canadian. Shruti with 200 rupees, right? Is that what that is? Thank you. Marilyn with $2. American says, gentlemen, you are anti-kooks. Let's not get carried away. We're we're works in progress. Thank you. Jonathan with $3.99. Jonathan then with 99 more cents. And Robert with $5 says, I know preppers, and it's sad. They're not insane, but they're consuming 24/7, 365 inputs of the very worst of that's what's happening out there.
Okay. If the limit of where is a deranged prepper is here, I'm somewhere here. So at some point I need to talk to you about so I just have a simple thing. I've lived in a country where we've seen capital controls in 2015. It's not fun waiting in lines in the ATM. It's not fun waiting lines in the supermarket. So it's difficult for me to dunk on preppers because I'm borderline prepper.
So what is a prepper?
Prepper is someone who stocks up stuff and prepares for the apocalypse.
Oh, okay. I mean, it's not a bad idea to be prepared, but
no, but I see the link. Yeah. So many of the people who are the type of person who attacked the Capitol are the people who think that there's an imminent disaster or a conspiracy, and they have like stocks for years, if not decades. Yeah. But anyway, again, it's difficult.
Long before I was talking about objectivism on the internet, I came up with this distinction, a way to differentiate objectivists from libertarians. So like the objectivist ideal is like a thriving civilization, cities, buildings, trade, happy, flourishing people engaging with one another and pursuing good lives. The libertarian ideal, and I know libertarian is a big tent of people, but basically one guy with a bunch of guns and a bunch of canned food in a cabin in the woods, who nobody better bother. Like that's kind of like their sort of, again, generalizing, but that is sort of like the archetypes.
I'm somewhere in the middle of the road between these two.
I'm telling you, you're missing out on the cosmopolitan dream. Never give up. Don't be like Tucker Carlson in his in a recent monologue he did on his show, where he said, Yaron Brook reacted to this on his podcast, where Tucker Carlson is saying, like, why are the liberals, the left, whatever, all these people trying to make us think we should live in cities, we should like skyscrapers, when we all know that skyscrapers are not good looking. They're not like, life in the woods is better. Like straight up, Tucker Carlson is just saying like, reject modernity, and it's very creepy. So it's, one of these moments where you're like, you can't make this stuff up. And I've also got abortion as a topic on my list of like things since January 6th, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the way that, Republicans finally got their dream of overturning Roe v. Wade as just kind of like a signifier of how out of touch they are with so many people. So it's not quite in the same category as like the vaccine or Ukraine, but I think in some way it's kind of like the original sort of pet issue for the right that sort of drives them out of progressive society. And I know the word progressive is triggering, but that word has meaning outside of the progressive movement,
Yeah. I haven't got an opinion on that, but I mean, I do have an opinion, but I mean, I haven't got anything deep to say. But Sam Harris, I remember, said something interesting after January 6th. He said, I'm not going to, in some ways, a proper coup, a proper military coup has some form of, for the lack of a better word, like gravitas. And this even like this. So I would even say overturning Roe versus Wade, you can say it is within the parameter of a battle of ideas, which is kind of clear what the one side believes and the other side believes. But I think the things that we discussed today are actually worse. Not worse in how they violate people's rights, but worse in what type of person with what type of thinking gets to these decisions. So that's why I wouldn't put it in the same category, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah, there's some parallels, but yeah, I mean, the way that people arrive at being anti-abortion is a more respectable process than just complete caprice.
Yeah. And, for a lack of a better word, yes, your respectable process would be a way to put it.
Free trade with 20 Swedish krone. Thank you. And Marilyn with $2 says the woods are damp and full of creepy, crawly things. Yep. So the midterms took place at the end of 2022 or in November. And that was like another, in a way, I compare it to January 6th, and just that once again, you would think Republicans you think they finally learned their lesson, that this path they have been on was not the way. And for a minute there, it looked like, oh, they're starting to do some soul searching. They're finally realizing Trump is not the guy. And maybe it's time to kind of rethink things. Are we coming off as crazy? Are people, are we connecting with a lot of voters? And within a few weeks, there was just no trace of that left. I think a big part of that was Elon Musk releasing the so-called Twitter files, and that I think gave a lot of Republicans the impression that, oh, if people knew about this, we would have won. And I don't think that's true. I think, you could publish those Twitter files on on every billboard in America, and I don't think it would really have changed the election results of the midterms. I think people are not into what this populist new right is selling. And thank you, Free Trade, for another 20 Swedish krones.
Thank you, Free Trade. And that's the I want to finish with this. What not being a tribalist means is that you can think for yourself and have an opinion which says that both sides are bad. Even one could say equally bad. So the fact that the left is so horrendous, as we saw in the summer of 2020, as we've seen for many, many years, does not mean that this should in any way impact the way you judge the other side, because then you're only harming yourself. Then you're only harming the way you think. And again, the way you think in one issue is how you think in many, many other issues. And this could have a very direct effect in your life. Think about the people who have said, I'm never taking a vaccine ever again, and I'm never giving to my child a vaccine ever again. So this can really have an effect in your life. So bad thinking, tribalistic thinking is something very bad for your life.
Absolutely. Not only people neglecting to properly vaccinate their kids, and put aside the COVID vaccine, just in general, people are not going to vaccinate their babies now because of this. But also, when violence does erupt and people are okay with it because it's violence against the establishment, they're thinking, yeah, well, so what? The establishment is one big giant, evil machine that's trying to poison all of us, so the more irrational things get, the bigger trouble we're in. So folks, method is everything. Method is key. We need to have a rational process of arriving at conclusions, and better to arrive at the wrong conclusion attempting to follow a process. Better to do that than to just sort of capriciously announce something that seems like it's probably true. And don't be motivated by negativity. We got a Vergard who's been a member for 3 months saying 1/6, the number of the beast. If I remembered the tune of that, I would sing it for you. Free Trade with another.
You don't remember
20.
the tune of Iron Maiden 666, the number of the beast?
Please sing it for us.
Well, I cannot sing in English, but
sing it in Greek. Song. Sing it in Greek, even better. The super chatters want to see that.
Well, it has to be a 4-digit super chat for that, so maybe another time.
All right, 4 digits. You all heard that. Go ahead. And I'll just say, your time will come. That's one tune I do remember. Free Trade with 20 Swedish krones. Yet again, thank you for that. Yes, your time will come. Republicans, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you've gotten us to a place where the left look like the adults in the room. It's sad, but you chose this.
You made Nancy Pelosi look like this dignified leader who takes control of the situation in the Capitol. You made the left look the adults in the room. That line you said there, I think that's the line of the episode.
There we go.
That's my takeaway from it.
Yeah, and the main takeaway of January 6th, again, to me, is just the failure of this new right. And they could have learned their lesson right then, but basically everything since then is like a footnote on January 6th. Just they're failing to learn that same lesson over and over again. And I don't know how many more elections Republicans need to lose at a federal level. I don't know how many more things need to happen where they drive themselves out of polite society. But it's basically January 6th was the moment. of clarity that they have failed to observe. And it's the failure of their so-called culture war. And this is something that even objectivists need to listen to. When you try to fight the culture war, when you try to change the culture, you can't really force the culture. Like you can't, it's like, listen, okay, I know we're out of time, but Nikos, you're the expert on this. It's an overstated narrative that the Frankfurt School and these guys set out to change the culture, right? It was much more of an organic process, but people like the Breitbarts of the world and Ben Shapiro, they like to paint this picture that like, oh, the Frankfurt School, they set out to change the culture, and the Woodstock hippies, they set out to take over the culture. But really, the culture changed organically because there was an intellectual thing happening and artists followed their inspiration and journalists followed what they thought was the correct, like what was the proper way, and teachers, etc. It was much more of an organic process. And that's how cultures really change. So conservatives, they try to like fight the culture war, change the culture. And I think probably objectivists should be looking at conservatives and saying, we don't want to be that. We don't want to be changing the culture. We want to be studying and teaching this philosophy. We want to be encouraging, people to follow their judgment and see how the culture changes as a result.
Well, I always see myself first and foremost as a political, if I say revolutionary, it's going to sound pompous. So I don't want to agree with you, but then the question is, what is my counter suggestion on how to change the culture, which I don't have it. So that's for another time.
Yes, and free trade with another 20 Swedish crowns. Thank you for that. And Christopher Smith with $6.99 Canadian. Thank you for that. Thank you, Canada, for showing your solidarity with us in America on such a sad and somber day. All right, well, thank you for joining us today. No upcoming shows today, but this Sunday at 3:30 p.m. UK time, it's the Objective Communication Study Group with James Valiant for ARCUK members. The session will also be live streamed for YouTube members. So become a member. Hit that join button or go to the ARCUK website to become a member. Yeah, a lot more we could have talked about, but we touched upon a lot. Thank you all for being with us here today. Thank you, Nikos. It takes a man. It takes a man to admit when he's wrong. And like the same way that a Christian doesn't want to be too virtuous because then he'll be guilty of pride. I want to be wrong more often so that I can admit I was wrong. Like I want to have that character building moment. I'm not wrong enough. I need to be wrong more often. Thank you all. See you all next week, and goodbye.